The knock came just as Emily Parker decided to eat cereal for dinner again, and that small, ordinary moment changed everything. She had lived in quiet towns before, but this one felt especially still. The kind of American suburb where porch lights clicked on at the same time and neighbors waved without really knowing each other. Emily was 36, recently divorced, and learning how heavy silence could feel when it followed you from room to room. When she opened the door, she saw Laura Bennett smiling like they were already friends. "We're your neighbors," Laura said warmly. "Next door? We're making dinner and thought you might want company." Behind her stood Daniel Bennett, calm and polite. Holding a bottle of wine like this was the most natural thing in the world. Emily almost said no. Not because she didn't want to go, but because saying yes felt like stepping out of a safe place she had built around herself. But loneliness has a way of making decisions for you. "Sure," Emily said. "I'd love that." The Bennett house felt different the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't fancy, but it felt lived in. Soft lights, clean lines, quiet music playing low. The kind of home that suggested balance. Laura moved easily through the kitchen, confident and relaxed. Daniel spoke gently, asking Emily about her move, her job, her life, without sounding like he was checking boxes. Dinner moved fast, conversation flowing without effort. Emily surprised herself by laughing, by telling stories she hadn't shared in a long time. She talked about growing up in Ohio, about moving for work, about how her marriage had ended without a big fight, just a slow fading. Daniel listened closely. Laura didn't interrupt. They didn't rush her words or try to fix anything. Emily noticed the way they looked at each other. Not intense, not dramatic, just aware, like they were always quietly checking in. Halfway through the meal, Emily realized she felt safe. That feeling caught her off guard. Laura asked about Emily's apartment, about whether she liked the neighborhood. Daniel talked about the town's small traditions, the farmer's market, the fall festival coming soon. Everything felt easy. But underneath the ease was something Emily couldn't quite name. When dessert came out, a simple homemade pie, the room felt warmer. The conversation turned softer. Laura mentioned how hard it was to keep friendships as adults. Daniel spoke about how people often stopped really seeing each other once routines took over. Emily felt like they were talking to her, not at her. She shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of her own presence, of being noticed. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was unfamiliar. As the evening ended, Emily stood to leave, thanking them for dinner. Laura walked her to the door. "You're welcome any time," Laura said. "Really?" Daniel nodded. "We mean that." Emily stepped back into her apartment, heart beating faster than it should have. She told herself it was just social energy, just the relief of being around people again. Still, sleep came slowly that night. The next morning, she saw Laura in the driveway. They waved. A moment later, Daniel appeared, coffee in hand. They chatted briefly, casually, like people who had known each other longer than one evening. Days passed. Then another invitation came. Coffee this time. Then a walk around the block. Emily found herself adjusting her schedule without thinking about it. She noticed how her apartment felt quieter now, how the walls seemed thinner. One evening, Emily mentioned her work stress, how she felt stuck. Daniel shared his own frustrations, speaking openly but calmly. Laura added her thoughts, never speaking over him, never pulling attention away. Emily felt included, like her voice mattered equally. She also noticed something else. They asked questions that went deeper than small talk. What made her feel fulfilled? What scared her? What she missed? Emily answered honestly, sometimes before she realized she was doing it. She talked about wanting connection without pressure, about feeling invisible in her marriage before it ended, about missing warmth more than passion. Laura listened closely. Daniel didn't look away. Nothing inappropriate was said. No lines were crossed. But Emily felt something shift inside her, like a door opening quietly. One night, after sharing takeout on the Bennett's porch, a sudden rainstorm trapped them under the awning. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. The moment felt suspended. Laura laughed softly. Daniel made a joke. Emily smiled, then grew quiet. "You okay?" Laura asked. Emily nodded, then shook her head. "I forgot what this feels like," she said. "Just being present." Laura didn't press. She simply said, "You deserve that." The rain passed. Emily went home. But the feeling stayed. Later that week, Emily overheard a disagreement through the thin walls. Not loud, not angry. Just tense. She didn't listen long, but it reminded her that even strong couples carried weight. The next day, Laura apologized for being distracted. Daniel looked thoughtful, distant. Emily realized something important then. They weren't perfect. They were human. And somehow that made the connection feel more real. Another dinner invitation came. Emily accepted. This time, the mood was quieter, more reflective. Laura spoke about how relationships changed over time, how love didn't disappear, but sometimes needed new ways to breathe. Daniel spoke about feeling emotionally full, yet strangely lonely. Emily felt her chest tighten. She understood that feeling too well. She didn't know when the space between them became charged, but she felt it clearly. Not sexual. Not inappropriate. Just emotional weight, shared understanding, and an unspoken awareness that something meaningful was forming. As the night ended, Emily stood at the door again. "This has been really nice," she said. Laura smiled. "We're glad you're here." Walking back to her apartment, Emily realized she wasn't confused. She was aware that the couple next door wanted more than shared meals, more than polite friendship. They wanted connection, honesty, and emotional closeness. And deep down, she knew the question wasn't what they wanted. It was what she was ready to give. She closed her door gently, leaning against it for a moment, feeling the quiet press in again. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt like a pause before something important. The storm didn't announce itself. It just arrived, sudden and loud, rattling the windows of Emily Parker's apartment and drenching the streets outside. She had intended to spend the evening alone, tucked under a blanket with a book. But the knock on her door changed everything. It was Laura Bennett, soaked from the rain, smiling apologetically. "Power's out in the neighborhood," she said. "Daniel and I thought you might like to come over." Candles, wine, and warm conversation. Emily hesitated. The logical part of her wanted to stay inside to protect her quiet routine. But something in Laura's eyes made her nod. She grabbed a coat and followed her neighbor next door, feeling the cold rain bite her cheeks and waking a thrill she hadn't felt in months. Inside the Bennett's home, candles glowed in every corner, casting shadows on the walls. Daniel was already there, arranging chairs around the living room. He looked up as she entered, giving her a calm, reassuring smile. "Glad you made it," he said simply. No fuss, no pressure, just an invitation to belong. The three of them settled on the floor around a small coffee table. The storm outside made the room feel intimate, enclosed, like the world beyond the walls didn't exist. Laura poured wine while Daniel lit more candles. Emily noticed the soft coordination between them, the silent understanding that didn't need words. They began talking about ordinary things at first, how the power outage reminded them of childhood storms, funny stories from their neighborhood, and the quirks of living in a small town. Emily laughed more than she had in weeks, forgetting the quiet heaviness that had followed her from apartment to apartment. But soon, the conversation shifted. Slowly, gently, it went deeper. Laura asked Emily what made her feel fulfilled, what scared her, and what she missed most in life. Daniel listened intently, nodding, sometimes adding quiet reflections without overpowering the conversation. Emily found herself speaking openly, revealing layers she rarely showed. She talked about her divorce, the quiet ache of loneliness that had lingered, and the fear of opening her heart again. Daniel and Laura listened without judgment. They didn't try to fix her or push her toward a solution. They simply heard her. The warmth in the room grew not from the candles or wine, but from the shared vulnerability. Emily noticed the small gestures the way Laura would glance at Daniel, and he at her, the gentle pauses before responding, the soft smiles that communicated understanding. It wasn't romantic in a conventional sense. It was something subtler, deeper, a recognition of each other's humanity. At one point, the conversation turned to love. Not just romantic love, but the quiet kind that shapes life. Friendships that endure. Partnerships that evolve, and connections that anchor us. Daniel spoke about how relationships could be fulfilling yet lonely if communication faded. Laura added how easy it was to feel invisible, even in a happy marriage, if you stopped sharing your inner world. Emily felt her chest tighten. She realized she wasn't just observing their lives. She was seeing reflections of her own experiences. Their honesty made her emotions rise, the kind of feeling she had buried under practicality and routines. Hours passed without notice. The storm continued outside, but inside, time seemed suspended. They spoke of hope, of longing, of small heartbreaks that had never been acknowledged. Emily found herself laughing, sometimes tearing up, and sometimes simply listening in quiet awe at how openly the Bennets shared themselves. There was a moment when Daniel spoke about missing a deep, meaningful connection, out of dissatisfaction, but out of human need. Emily felt a shiver of recognition. She had felt the same longing for months, and hearing someone articulate it so clearly made her feel less alone. Laura leaned back, looking at Emily with calm, steady eyes. "You shouldn't have to hide how you feel," she said softly. "Being honest about your emotions doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Emily wanted to respond, but words failed her. She simply nodded, feeling a flood of gratitude for being in a place where she could be herself without fear of judgment. As the night wore on, they talked about dreams they had abandoned and plans they still hoped to pursue. Emily felt a gentle pull in her chest, a subtle awareness that the connection between them wasn't fleeting. It was real, grounded, and quietly powerful. At one point, the storm subsided and a calm silence filled the streets. Emily realized that she had stayed longer than she intended, but leaving felt impossible. She lingered near the doorway, caught between the comfort of her apartment and the warmth of the Bennets' home. Laura noticed and smiled gently. "You don't have to go," she said. "Not yet." Emily shook her head, almost laughing at herself for feeling nervous. "I know," she admitted. I don't know what to do with this feeling." Daniel looked at her kindly. "It's okay to feel it," he said. "Sometimes you just need to let yourself experience it without labeling it or overthinking it." Emily stood there, absorbing their words. It wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't even a declaration of intent. It was a simple acknowledgement that emotions mattered, that human connection could exist without conditions or fear. When she finally left, Emily walked home slowly, savoring the quiet aftermath of the evening. The air felt fresher, the night more alive. She realized she wasn't confused, but awake, aware of something important that had been missing in her life. Days turned into weeks. Emily found herself drawn back to the Bennets' home, not out of habit, but because she wanted to be near people who saw her, who respected her, who invited her to share her world without pressure. Every encounter revealed something new. A story Daniel shared about his childhood. A memory Laura recounted about love and loss. A quiet moment when all three of them just sat together in silence. Each moment built a bridge of trust and understanding. Emily started noticing subtleties. How the Bennets communicated without words. The way they offered emotional space without withdrawing care. The gentle attentiveness that made her feel seen. She realized she had never experienced connection like this before. Not like this, where intimacy didn't require romance or drama, but simply honesty. One evening, Emily and the Bennets found themselves on the porch again, watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and pink, reflecting off the wet streets from a brief rain earlier. Emily felt a deep calm, but also an undercurrent of anticipation she couldn't name. Laura spoke first. "Do you ever feel like life moves too fast, and we miss the moments that matter most?" Emily nodded. "All the time." Daniel added, "Sometimes the moments are right in front of us, and we just need to notice them." The simplicity of their words struck her. Nothing dramatic. No pressure. Just clarity. Emily realized that what they offered wasn't a complicated emotion or an affair. It was presence, connection, attention. Something rare and precious in a world that demanded so much noise and distraction. That night, walking home, Emily understood that the Bennets didn't want to complicate her life. They wanted to share life in a way that was meaningful, honest, and deeply human. The question wasn't what they were asking of her, was what she was willing to allow herself to feel. She stopped at her apartment door, breathing deeply. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt expectant, like a pause before a turning point. She knew the story wasn't over. It was just beginning, shaped by choices, trust, and the willingness to feel again. And Emily realized something important. The couple next door didn't want something reckless, and she didn't either. They wanted connection. They wanted understanding. They wanted moments that mattered. Standing there in the quiet night, Emily understood that she had a choice. To step forward into a connection that felt safe and real, or to retreat into her old solitude. And for the first time in a long time, she wanted to step forward. The space between their homes, once just a simple line of grass and sidewalk, now felt like a bridge. A bridge built from quiet trust, gentle laughter, shared stories. And the unspoken promise that hearts could meet without rushing. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy. Life rarely is. But for the first time in years, she felt that she wasn't walking alone. The Bennets weren't asking for more than she could give. They were offering what everyone secretly craved: honesty, warmth, and the courage to let someone see your true self. And that night, as Emily closed her door, she didn't feel fear. She felt possibility. She wasn't sure where this connection would lead. Love, friendship, something in between. It didn't matter yet. What mattered was that she was awake, ready to feel, and ready to step into a story that was already changing her life. The couple next door didn't want more than dinner. They wanted to be seen, to be understood, to share something human. And now Emily knew she wanted that too. She leaned against the door for a moment, smiling to herself, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. The world hadn't changed. The quiet hadn't disappeared. But her heart had, and that was enough to make all the difference. The night held a promise. Subtle but undeniable, real connection once found could quietly reshape life, and Emily was finally ready to embrace it.